So we now have been forced to reckon with the ways in which policing produces and reproduces racial inequality in the United States. We can see the racially disparate outcomes in arrest rates, use of force, and police killings. And the nation, not just this summer, but for the last 5 or 6 years, has been grappling with how to respond to these racially disparate outcomes in policing. In the wake of the police killings of Mike Brown and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice, we were told that these problems of race in policing would get addressed through a series of procedural reforms, the kinds of things that were laid out in President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing report. That commission pulled together a whole set of recommendations designed to try to make police more professional, less biased, more transparent, and more accountable, in the belief that this would reduce the racially disparate outcomes of policing. Implicit bias training, de-escalation training, body cameras, community review board, civilian review boards of various kinds would help to wash racism out of policing so that the police could get back to doing the work that they felt was essential to policing with greater community trust and participation. And at first glance, this sounds incredibly appealing. We want to try to address these deep racial divisions in our society. And we would hope that if the police would kill fewer unarmed Black people, that this would pave the way to some level of racial reconciliation. The problem is that this proceduralist-oriented approach to the problems of racism in American policing is completely inadequate. It fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the problem. We can see this most clearly with the emphasis on implicit bias training. Implicit bias training rests on the idea that the problems of racially disparate outcomes are located in individual discretionary decision-making by officers that is unconscious and unintentional, and that can be remedied by a series of training interventions designed to make officers more self-aware of the racial disparities in American society that may unconsciously affect their attitude about different racial groups that then affects their behavior towards them. Well, the first problem with this is that we have a problem of explicit racism in American policing. When we look for it, we find it in the chat rooms, on the Facebook pages, in the official statements of many police union leaders, or their willingness to defend openly racist behavior by their members. We see this in FBI investigations that have shown conscious attempts of white supremacist groups to infiltrate American policing. We see the racist tattoos and the dog whistle appeals to tough on crime policies. This is not going to be fixed by implicit bias training. But we have a bigger problem. The problems of race and policing can't possibly be limited to the discretionary decision-making of individual officers, racist or otherwise. We have a large number of non-white officers in American policing. In many of our big cities, a majority of officers are non-white, including many of the command staff. The problems of race in policing run much deeper than this. They're built into a set of political decisions. The decision to turn the problems of Black and brown communities and many poor white communities into problems to be addressed through policing. That very decision places an extra burden on those communities. It says that the solution to those communities' problems can be achieved through the use of force, arrest, violence, and ultimately mass incarceration. And well-off, leafy suburban neighborhoods, their social problems don't get addressed by the criminal justice system. Their families can afford high-quality drug treatment services. They have health insurance that gives access to mental health services. They have heavily resourced schools where children's problems get dealt with in therapeutic ways that build them up instead of tearing them down.